Welcome to the first gameplay test of the Hovercraft game. The purpose of this test is to evaluate the handling and movement feel of the hovercraft on a dummy racetrack. The entire visual setup is intended purely for testing and validating different gameplay features to help convey a sense of speed. Basic visual elements such as grass, a rudimentary particle system, and simple props for scale reference have been integrated. 3 built-in camera perspectives are available based on commonly used viewing angles. In addition, a look at automatic camera mode can be enabled. On the logic side, a basic ghost car system has been implemented. A race manager displays lap times and uses a checkpoint system to verify whether a full lap has been completed. Additionally, the different forces acting on the hovercraft can be visualized for debugging and analysis purposes. Let's take a look at the controls. The goal is to create a balanced mix between physical realism and enjoyable gameplay, while still working with a limited set of inputs. Because the controls are quite different from typical racing games, and the vehicle doesn't behave in the usual way, it might feel a bit unfamiliar or complex at first. To make things easier, the controls are divided into 3 difficulty levels. In the first level, the focus is on the basics. Players use only thrust and rudder controls, making it easier to learn how the hovercraft moves, glides, and drifts. At this stage, the pilot also automatically mimics natural body movement and head rotation to a certain extent based on speed and drift angle. This helps enhance the overall game feel and makes the movement more immersive. The next step introduces direct control over the pilot. Through their inputs, the player shifts the pilot's weight, which in turn affects the overall behavior of the vehicle. This influences factors like friction, aerodynamics, and thrust, not just in terms of strength, but also where and in which direction these forces are applied. The direction of the air cushion thrust also changes accordingly. All of these forces can be used to support control, for example by enabling slightly faster acceleration or reducing air resistance at higher speeds. As a result, the hovercraft can be made to turn more easily or become more stable, depending on the player's input. The third level of complexity introduces control over the lift engine. By increasing the lift force, not only does the hover height rise, but all tilt-dependent forces are amplified as well. This allows for very precise adjustments and targeted force application. However, it also comes with increased instability and raises the risk of tipping over in certain driving situations. At the moment, this system is not yet fully balanced. Right now, the added complexity does not consistently translate into noticeable improvements in lap times. In the end, the hovercraft can be controlled using up to 9 different inputs. This could also serve as a way to reflect different player skill levels. Here, you can see the 3 different input complexity levels side by side. The times should only be considered as rough references, since they heavily depend on the player's skill level and practice. However, you can already get an idea of how the different control schemes affect performance in certain situations. In this example, the time difference between level 1 and level 2 is within a reasonable range. Level 3, however, appears to be slower when considering the added complexity. That said, this may also come down to my own skill level or lack of practice, especially when it comes to coordinating all 9 inputs effectively. The next point I want to briefly explain is what I call the foil force. Here you can see different efficiency levels and their effects. Up to a certain degree, this force is active at almost any tilt angle. Within a specific range, it can have very strong positive effects on handling and lap times. However, beyond a certain point, it turns into a massive air brake, which also leads to instability. All of this can also be used to the player's advantage. If it becomes too strong and is not counteracted, for example through pilot weight shifting, it can even result in a rollover. Currently, 3 different camera positions are implemented for testing, representing the typical camera setups found in racing games. These are intended to evaluate different levels of immersion. In addition to the standard wide camera, there is a camera positioned above the rear rotor housing. This one shows the pilot's movements in more detail, which are driven both by player input and by automatic natural motion and head rotation. The usual first-person POV perspective creates the strongest sense of speed. It offers more immersion and feeling, but less overall overview. However, it also brings you closer to other players, which can make interactions more intense. As a test, a kind of look at camera function has been implemented. This can make control easier as the camera automatically aligns with the driving direction based on drift angle and speed. This is especially useful in camera modes 2 and 3, where additional situational awareness can be an advantage. However, this automatic camera movement can also be distracting for some players during gameplay, especially if they are not used to it yet. On the other hand, it generally feels more natural and smoother, which can be more pleasant both for the player and for the viewer. In this test build, there is also the option to visualize the different forces, similar to what is shown in the explanatory videos about the hovercraft physics. This helps to better evaluate the various influences acting on the vehicle. Suspension movement is represented by red spheres. The pink arrows show all thrust-related forces such as main rotor thrust, rudder effects as thrust, and the air cushion thrust vector. The blue arrows represent aerodynamic forces. This also includes the influence of the foil force. The yellow arrows indicate friction forces, although their length does not directly represent their actual strength compared to the other forces. This test build is currently highly unoptimized and represents a very early, raw state of the project. It does not include a loading screen or other quality of life features at this stage. However, if you've made it this far into the video, there's a good chance the project might be interesting to try out firsthand. If you're open to testing an unfinished prototype, feel free to contact me to get access to the build. It's more about exploration and experimentation at this stage, but it can already be fun to play around with. The current test setup runs on Windows 10, using an RTX 4080 Super and an AMD Threadripper system. At the moment, physics calculations are the main bottleneck. In 4K resolution, the build currently runs at around 40 to 60 frames per second. Thanks for taking the time to watch this playtest overview. I really appreciate it. If you found it interesting, feel free to share the video. That really helps spread the project and support its development. I'll keep posting updates when there are meaningful new developments. And of course, likes and subscriptions also help push the video and support the channel. Thanks again for watching.